The static on the line was nothing compared to the ringing in my ears as my father's words registered through the phone. "You need to come home next weekend. Vanessa's parents want to meet the whole family." My screen flashed with an incoming email, the mortgage pre-approval I'd been waiting for. 6 months in Oregon. 6 months of silence from the people who were supposed to love me. 6 months of not being missed, not being looked for, not being thought of, until they needed something. The cursor hovered over the accept button for my dream home as my father continued talking about appearances and family obligations. I felt my hand tighten around the phone until my knuckles turned white. The pressure was building behind my eyes as 29 years of invisibility crystallized into perfect clarity. "I make more money than all of you combined," I said, my voice steadier than it had any right to be. The silence on the other end felt like the first honest thing my father had given me in years. "My name is Ruby. I'm 29, and I build digital fortresses for a living. This is the story of how I became visible by disappearing. For as long as I could remember, I'd been the extra in my family's portrait. Quiet, invisible, acceptable only when useful. My brother Lincoln was the sun, the center, the reason the camera flashed. I was background. When I was 8, I made honor roll for the 3rd time in a row. I laid the report card neatly on the kitchen table where I knew my mother would sit down with her tea. She glanced at it once and said, "Good job, honey," without looking up from her phone. That same week, Lincoln got a C+ on a math quiz and still got to pick dinner. The year I won first place in the regional science fair, I came home with a trophy, half my height. My teacher had pulled me aside that morning and said I should be proud. I was. I wanted them to be too. At dinner, I placed the trophy on the counter. My father said, "Let's not make a big deal out of it, Ruby. Your brother has finals." That was the year I stopped bringing awards home. By the time I turned 17, I knew I'd be paying for college myself. I got into a state school with a scholarship, picked up 2 part-time jobs, and stopped coming home for breaks. It was easier that way, cleaner. I graduated early, moved into a shared apartment, took whatever freelance work I could find. My resume grew faster than my social life, but I didn't mind. Work was something I could control. Work didn't forget me at the dinner table. Eventually, I landed a job with a cybersecurity firm based in Seattle. Remote, flexible hours, full benefits. I'd been there almost 3 years now. My boss said I had a knack for untangling the chaos that other engineers overlooked. My savings account had commas in it. My fridge had real food. My inbox had a pre-approval letter from a mortgage broker. I was finally thinking about buying a house. Nothing big, just mine. So when my father's voice tried to pull me back into obligation, into performances dressed as family duties, I didn't flinch. I just let the silence stretch long enough to make it clear I wasn't coming. "You need to come home next weekend." That was the first thing he said. Not hello, not how have you been, just a directive delivered like I was still 18 and waiting for permission to breathe. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Why? There was a pause. I could practically hear him rolling his eyes through the phone. "Your brother's engagement dinner. Vanessa's parents want to meet the whole family. They're very traditional." Of course, not a reunion, not a reconnection, just another image to maintain, a daughter-shaped placeholder at the table to round out the illusion of family. "I won't be there." Another pause, sharper this time. "What do you mean you won't be there?" "I mean exactly that. I have other plans." "Ruby, this is important for your brother's future. They're high-profile people. It'll reflect badly on us if you don't show up." There it was, us, not me, not how I was doing or where I'd been, just the optics. "I moved to Oregon 6 months ago," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not flying across the country for a dinner I wasn't even invited to until now." Silence, the kind that isn't quiet at all, but charged like air before a storm. "You moved to Oregon? Without telling us?" "You didn't know where I was before. Why would this be different?" His voice dropped low and tight. "How dare you move without telling your family? What's your address?" I almost laughed. "Do you even remember my last one?" He didn't answer right away, and that told me everything. "That's not the point." It's exactly the point, I said. You're not asking because you care. You're asking because now it's inconvenient not to know. Ruby, this isn't how families work. No, I said, but it's how ours always has. I hung up. My hand didn't even shake. For a moment, I just sat there letting the silence rush back in. Then the screen lit up again. Missed call, then another. Then a text from him, from my mother, then Lincoln. I didn't answer any of them. I just turned off my phone, made myself tea, and stood on the balcony watching the light drain from the sky. By the next morning, the texts had turned from reminders into guilt, and from guilt into threats. By the end of the week, I'd received 6 voicemails, 11 texts, and 2 emails with subject lines like, "Can we talk?" and "Family should stick together." My mother finally called. Her voice was tight with restraint, like she was trying to sound warm without dropping the script. "Sweetheart, this isn't like you. You've always been so respectful. Your brother's counting on you. Vanessa's parents are formal people. We need to show unity." Unity, a word that means nothing when it's only summoned for guests. "I'm not going," I said simply. "Ruby, don't be difficult." "I'm not. I'm being honest." She sighed, frustrated. "It's just one dinner. You don't have to stay long. Smile, say a few words, and then you can disappear again if that's what you want." "You mean like I already have?" Another silence. Then she hung up. Lincoln tried next. His tone was different, less forceful, more confused. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Mom and Dad, but can't you just show up? For me?" I almost felt something, almost, but I remembered all the years he looked away while I was overlooked. "No," I said, "not this time." The next day, my father called again. His voice had shed the pretense. "If you don't show up to this dinner," he said, "you're out of the will." I let the silence stretch just long enough to give him hope I was weighing it. Then I said calmly, clearly, "I make more money than all of you combined." I could hear him inhale like he'd been slapped. "You're bluffing." "If you'd ever asked about my life," I said, "you'd know I'm not." He didn't respond. He just hung up. That was the last call I took. From that point on, I watched the messages come in like waves, first urgent, then desperate, then angry again. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened a new tab on my laptop and clicked back to the real estate listing I'd saved the week before. It was still there. 3 bedrooms, cedar siding, room for a garden. Grandma Olivia called the next morning just as the sky turned pink behind the trees. She never waited for permission, never checked if I was free. She just called, and I always answered. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice steady with that mix of gentleness and knowing. "How's the air up there today?" "Cool and quiet," I said, "like I like it." We talked for a few minutes about the lavender I'd planted on the balcony, about the deer that sometimes wandered behind the apartment. Then she paused. "They asked me to call you," she said, not apologizing, just stating the fact. "I figured," I said. "Let me guess. Convince me to come back and play the part." "They didn't use those words," she paused, "but yes. Your mother's been pacing. Your father's in a mood. They're panicking." "Because they miss me?" I asked, knowing the answer. She hesitated just long enough. "Because Vanessa's parents are watching and asking questions." I laughed under my breath. Of course. My value had finally surfaced, tied neatly to someone else's expectations. "I'm not going, Grandma." "I know," she said. "I wouldn't either. That's why I always picked up." She didn't sugarcoat things. She didn't make excuses for them or pretend the past hadn't happened. She remembered my birthdays, sent me postcards from her little trips, asked about my job, and actually listened to the answers. She was the only one who ever looked directly at me and saw more than what I could offer. "I just wanted you to hear it from someone honest," she said, "not because I think you owe them anything." "Thank you," I said. "Are you okay?" "I am," I said, and I meant it. "Really?" I stayed on the phone with her until the tea in my mug went cold. She asked about the house I was looking at and whether I planned to paint the walls or leave them plain. We talked about furniture and fig trees and things that had nothing to do with obligation. By the time we said goodbye, the sun was warming the windows, and I had already opened the mortgage calculator again. The next afternoon, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize, Vanessa Parks. Lincoln must have shared my email address with her from our old holiday communications. The subject line read simply, "About this weekend." I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. "Ruby, we haven't met, but I'm marrying your brother. I wanted to reach out directly because I'm confused. Your parents told me you were ill, then working, then at a conference. But last night, my mother noticed how your father changed the subject every time she asked about you. Lincoln won't talk about it either. I get the sense there's something deeper happening. If you're uncomfortable coming to the dinner, I understand. But I'd like to know why my future husband has a sister no one mentions. I don't mean to intrude, but family means everything to me. I can't ignore the feeling that something's not right here. If you're willing to talk, I'd appreciate it. Either way, I hope you're well. Vanessa." I read it twice, then a third time. The words slipped past my defenses. Direct, sincere, observant. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I began typing. "Vanessa, thank you for reaching out. The truth is simple. I've been invisible to my family for as long as I can remember. 6 months ago, I moved across the country. Until this dinner became important to them. No one noticed I was gone. No calls, no texts, not even questions about why my birthday card was returned undelivered. I won't be at the dinner, but not because of you. I've spent my life showing up for people who couldn't see me. I'm done performing family for an audience. If my brother loves you, I hope he treats you better than the women in his family have been treated. And if you're building a life with him, I hope you go in with eyes open. I wish you well, Ruby." I didn't expect a response, but one came within the hour. "That explains a lot. Thank you for your honesty. I have more questions if you're willing to answer them sometime. V." I closed my laptop without replying. The ball was in my court now, and for once I wasn't rushing to pick it up. That night, I applied for the mortgage. My fingers didn't hesitate on a single field. The dinner day came and went without me. I spent the morning on a trail just outside Lithia Park, weaving between tall trees and early spring wildflowers. The silence out there wasn't empty. It was earned. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder what was happening on the other side of the country. I breathed deeply, let the wind move around me, and kept walking. When I got home that evening, there was a missed call from Grandma Olivia. I called her back before even taking off my boots. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "You enjoying your mountaineer day?" "Every second," I said. She exhaled slowly. "Well, the dinner happened." I waited. "It was tense," she said. "The kind of tension that looks polite on the outside but makes your neck stiff just sitting in the same room." Sounds familiar. I paused. "Wait, how do you know what happened?" She chuckled softly. "Vanessa's grandmother and I go to the same bridge club. She called me right after the dinner. Your parents did their best to keep it together, but Meredith couldn't stop fidgeting. Your father barely spoke. Vanessa's mother kept glancing around like she was waiting for someone." "Me?" "Yes. And when she realized you weren't coming, she asked why." I closed my eyes, let the moment land. "What did they say?" "They tried different versions. First they said you were sick, then that work had called you away, then that you were traveling for some conference." All lies. Vanessa's mother knew it. You could see it in her face. She pressed harder, asked why you hadn't been at the engagement party either, asked why she only found out you existed a few weeks ago, and apparently she had a private conversation with your mother after the rehearsal dinner. No one knows exactly what was said, but your mother came out of it pale and quiet. I think she got read like a book. I almost smiled. "What about Lincoln?" "He looked distracted all night, kept checking the door, never smiled long. Vanessa looked upset through most of the ceremony. I don't think she bought the family portrait they were trying to paint." I sat down at the kitchen table, letting that sink in. Not out of malice, just the kind of satisfaction that comes from truth finally catching up to the noise. "They still think this is about a dinner party," I said. I know, she replied. But Vanessa's parents saw it, Ruby. The imbalance, the omissions, the damage. We talked for another 10 minutes about nothing in particular. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and scrolled through new listings. The house I'd been eyeing was still available. I bookmarked it again just in case. A week after the dinner, Grandma Olivia called again. I was in the middle of unpacking a box labeled Kitchen, Fragile, when the phone lit up with her name. "They're still talking about it," she said, without needing to explain what it was. "Vanessa's parents?" "Yes, they've asked Lincoln directly now, why you weren't involved, why no one mentioned you until the last minute, why you've disappeared." "And what did he say?" "He tried to downplay it at first, but I think even he's starting to realize it's not just going away. Vanessa's mother doesn't like being lied to." I set down a stack of plates and leaned against the counter. Is the marriage already cracking? There's tension, the kind that doesn't fade with a honeymoon. I didn't feel glee. I didn't want things to fall apart for him. I just felt still, like watching ripples in a pond after dropping a single stone. "They've started asking around," Grandma said. "Your parents wanting to know who might have your new number, your address. They even asked me again." "You didn't tell them, right?" "Of course not. I told them if you wanted to talk to them, you would." I breathed out slowly. "Thank you." "They're nervous," she continued. "Not just about you, about what Vanessa's parents might do, what they might say, what this might mean for Lincoln's future." "They're worried about damage control," I said, "not about me." "Yes," she said quietly, "but they're starting to realize this doesn't just disappear. The way they treated you, it left marks." I looked around the small kitchen. Sunlight on the counters, new dish towels folded by the sink, a window above the stove that overlooked a row of pines. This wasn't just where I lived, it was mine. "They're the ones who disappeared," I said. "They just didn't notice until someone else did." She didn't reply right away, but I could hear the pride in her silence, the kind that never had to be spoken out loud. 3 days later, an email arrived from Vanessa again. "Ruby, I hope this isn't unwelcome. Things have been tense since the dinner. Your parents are acting like nothing happened, but my mother won't let it go. She keeps asking questions I can't answer. Lincoln finally admitted that no one has spoken to you in months. He seemed surprised when I asked why, like it had never occurred to him to wonder. I'm questioning everything now. The family I thought I was marrying into feels like a carefully arranged photograph with pieces missing. My parents are suggesting we postpone the wedding. They say families that keep secrets keep other things too. I don't know what to do, but I keep thinking about your email, about being invisible in your own family. I can't unsee it now. Vanessa." I read it twice, then once more. Her words carried no manipulation, no guilt, just genuine confusion. I hesitated, then replied. "Vanessa, I spent years trying to be seen in that family. I achieved perfect grades, won competitions, graduated early, built a career, and none of it mattered. The day I stopped trying to earn their attention was the day I started becoming myself. I didn't disappear to punish them. I disappeared because staying visible required too much of me and gave back too little. If Lincoln and my parents are struggling now, it's not because I left. It's because someone finally noticed the empty space I occupied for 29 years. Whatever you decide about the wedding, make sure it's for you, not for appearances. Some family portraits look perfect until you notice the daughter's eyes never smile. Ruby." I didn't expect what happened next. 2 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against better judgment, I answered. "Ruby." Lincoln's voice sounded different, smaller, uncertain. I said nothing, just waited. I got your number from Vanessa. She said she's been emailing you." "She has." The silence stretched between us, years wide. "Vanessa's parents want to cancel the wedding," he finally said. "They think our family is dishonest." "Aren't we?" "That's not fair." "When's my birthday, Lincoln?" Another silence. "It's in spring." "It's November 12th. I'm a Scorpio. Mom's allergic to shellfish. Dad hates jazz music. I graduated summa cum laude. I speak conversational Japanese. I've never broken a bone. My favorite color is green. I'm allergic to penicillin. Ruby. These are things family members know about each other. Basic things. Things that matter when you care about someone. You don't know them because you never asked. None of you did. I could hear him breathing on the other end. I didn't realize. That's the problem. You didn't realize I was gone until someone else noticed I was missing. A long pause. What do I do? For the first time in our conversation, something in me softened. Not toward him, but toward the truth I was finally speaking. That depends on what you want, Lincoln. If you want to save your wedding, be honest with Vanessa's family about ours. If you want to know me, start by seeing me. If you want to keep pretending we're something we're not, then don't call again. Can I come see you? Talk in person? No, I said firmly. I'm not ready for that. I have a life here, one that doesn't include performing family reunions. Then what? You just disappear forever? And there it was, the framing that made him comfortable, the narrative where I was irrational, difficult, punishing. This isn't punishment, Lincoln. It's consequence. You can't ignore someone for years and then demand they show up when it's convenient. That's not how relationships work. But we're family, he said, like the word itself was enough. Family is more than DNA and dinner parties, I replied. It's showing up when it doesn't benefit you. It's remembering birthdays and asking questions and caring about the answers. It's making space for someone even when they're inconvenient or different. We've never been that kind of family. We could try, he said quietly. You could, I agreed, but not because Vanessa's parents are threatening to cancel a wedding, not because you suddenly need something from me. You'd have to want it for its own sake. I do, he said, but his voice wavered. Then prove it. Not today, not in a grand gesture. Prove it over time, like trust is built. Learn who I am, see me clearly, acknowledge what happened, and maybe someday we can try again. Will you talk to Vanessa's parents? Explain that this isn't about them? I almost laughed. No, Lincoln, I won't clean up this mess for you. If you want to marry Vanessa, you need to be honest with her family. Tell them the truth, that you've been part of a family that didn't value all its members equally, that you're beginning to see it now, that you want to do better. The silence that followed felt different, less defensive, more considering. I never meant to make you feel invisible, he finally said. I know, I replied. That's what made it worse. After we hung up, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. My phone pinged with a text from Grandma Olivia. You okay? Better than okay, I replied, and I meant it. That night, I finished unpacking the kitchen and lit a candle by the sink. The house already felt like home. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's blocky, careful print, like he thought neatness could cover history. Grandma Olivia had mentioned that he'd asked around for my address. I guess he finally got it from the mortgage company's public records or hired someone to find me. I stood at the mailbox for a long moment, the envelope heavy despite its weight. I didn't bring it inside. I walked straight to the fire pit in the backyard, struck a match, and dropped it in. The paper curled inward, blackened, then disappeared into ash. I already knew how it ended. The next morning, I signed the final paperwork for the house. 3 weeks after applying for the mortgage, it was officially mine. My name on every line. No cosigner, no conditions, just mine. Theo and May texted about flights for next month. They wanted to see the place and help me plant the first flowers. I'd already cleared a corner of the yard for tomatoes in time. Later that evening, after returning home from signing the paperwork, I registered for a graduate course in digital forensics. Not because I needed it, just because I could. I changed my phone number the same week. Only a handful of people got the new one. Olivia, my boss, Theo, May. That was enough. No more surprise calls. No more texts asking for favors disguised as obligations. No more family dinners where my name was an afterthought. The house was quiet, not lonely, just honest. 6 months later, after moving into my new house, my backyard was filled with voices and the smell of roasted corn and grilled peaches. Theo and May, my closest friends from college who now lived in California, were visiting for the weekend. Theo was manning the grill like it was a science experiment. May balanced a pitcher of sangria in one hand and a stack of mismatched cups in the other. The folding table overflowed with potluck dishes. Quiche, sesame noodles, a suspicious-looking casserole someone insisted was a family recipe. A neighbor's golden retriever flopped at my feet. Across the yard, my co-worker's daughter, Marin, tugged at my sleeve and handed me a plastic bracelet she'd made from string. "You're my aunt now," she said solemnly, "but the fun kind." "I'll take that," I said, slipping it on. Later, as twilight settled in, someone I barely knew from the next street over asked, "Do you have family back east?" I didn't hesitate. "Not anymore." There was a beat of quiet, and then I smiled, gesturing to the table where Theo was laughing so hard he'd spilled lemonade on his shirt, where May was dancing barefoot to a playlist I didn't even know I had. "But I have this," I said, and I meant it. When everyone had left and the yard was quiet again, I gathered the plates, folded the chairs, and stood at the edge of the garden with the string bracelet still on my wrist. Fireflies blinked near the fence. My house glowed softly behind me. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was mine. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one. The sudden shift in Margaret Collins' tone made my fingertips go cold against the worn leather of my father's chair. "Harrison Global Enterprises was sold 3 years ago," she announced through the video screen, her silver hair gleaming under professional lighting. The grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to tick louder in the silence that followed. I watched my brother's expressions transform in real time. James' perfect composure crumbling, William's confidence evaporating as they processed what this meant for their inheritance expectations. "Sold?" William's voice cracked. "That's impossible." "To whom?" James demanded, the edge of hysteria already creeping into his tone. "To Phoenix Capital Partners," Margaret replied, then paused deliberately before adding, "specifically to their CEO." "This is absurd. Phoenix Capital? I've never even heard of them. Dad would never sell to strangers." James forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow in the oak-paneled study. "You're right," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "He wouldn't." Both brothers turned to stare at me. The rain that had been falling all morning suddenly stopped, weak sunlight illuminating their bewildered faces through the leaded glass windows. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder, placing it carefully on Dad's mahogany desk. "Phoenix Capital Partners was founded 4 years ago," I explained, my voice steady. "It's a private investment firm specializing in corporate restructuring and long-term wealth management, and I'm the CEO. My name is Rebecca. I'm 28 and the youngest Harrison sibling. This is the story of how I reclaimed our family legacy while teaching my brothers what it truly means to earn your inheritance." James and William had always seen me as the family disappointment. Rebecca Harrison, the daughter who chose to study business instead of law or medicine, who had moved away to find herself instead of staying to learn the family business. If they only knew. Just minutes earlier, they had been arguing over who would get which piece of the family fortune. "The summer house in Martha's Vineyard is obviously mine," James had declared, running his hand through his expertly styled hair. At 35, he was the eldest and had always assumed he'd inherit the lion's share. "You barely visit," William had scoffed. "I'm there every season with my family." At 33, he considered himself the more deserving heir. I had remained silent, fingers tracing the worn leather of Dad's old chair while they talked around me rather than to me. James had turned to me with his condescending smile. "You can have the cottage in Vermont. It's quaint, perfect for your lifestyle." The cottage was worth maybe a fraction of the main estate. Now, as I revealed my true position, the security cameras Dad had installed years ago perfectly captured James' face, draining of color, and William's jaw dropping open. "You?" William whispered. "But you were traveling, starting your own business, you said." "I was," I confirmed. "Phoenix Capital was my startup. Dad was my first investor." James lunged for the folder, fingers trembling as he flipped through the documents. Sale agreements, transfer papers, board meeting minutes, all signed and notarized, all completely legal. "This is a joke," he sputtered. "Dad would never... You couldn't possibly be..." "Your sister," Margaret interjected, "spent 2 years proving herself to your father." She presented a comprehensive plan to modernize Harrison Global Enterprises and expand into new markets. While you two were fighting over corner offices, Rebecca was learning every aspect of the business. I remembered those long nights with Dad, poring over financials, discussing strategy, proving I had the vision and capability to take our family legacy forward. He'd seen what my brothers never had, that my time away hadn't been aimless wandering but careful preparation. "The company holdings," Margaret continued, "including all subsidiary businesses, real estate portfolios, and investment accounts, were legally transferred to Phoenix Capital Partners in 2020. Your father remained as chairman emeritus until his passing, but all operational control has been with Rebecca for the past 3 years." William collapsed into a chair. "But the estate, the properties..." I opened my laptop, pulling up the relevant documents. "The manor, the summer house, the properties in Europe, they're all owned by Harrison Global Enterprises, which means they belong to you," James finished, his voice hollow. "To Phoenix Capital," I corrected. "Dad and I restructured everything. More efficient for tax purposes, you see." The weak sunlight broke through the clouds outside. Somewhere in the house, the housekeeper was probably preparing afternoon tea, just as she had every day for the past 30 years. But in this room, the world had tilted on its axis. "Why?" William asked. "Why the secrecy? Why not tell us?" I met his eyes squarely. "Would you have accepted it? Working for your little sister? Taking direction from the one you always saw as the family disappointment?" James stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This isn't over. We'll contest the will." "Actually," Margaret interrupted, "we should discuss the will now because your father left some very interesting conditions regarding your continued involvement with the company." I sat back, watching my brothers' faces. They had no idea that this was just the beginning. Dad's real surprise was still to come, and I had front row seats to watch it unfold. "Ready when you are, Margaret," I said calmly. "Let's tell them about Phase 2. Margaret adjusted her glasses and looked directly at my brothers through the video screen. "Phase 2 of your father's plan involves a rather unique arrangement for your continued involvement with Harrison Global Enterprises." James was still standing, his perfectly tailored suit now wrinkled from nervous fidgeting. "We don't need arrangements. This is our birthright." "Actually," I interjected, pulling up another document on my laptop, "you both signed away those rights 3 years ago." "What?" William leaned forward. "We never signed anything." I turned my laptop around. "Remember that stack of quarterly reports Dad had you sign? The ones you never bothered to read? Page 394 of each report contained a gradual transfer of your voting rights and company shares to Phoenix Capital." The color drained from their faces as recognition dawned. Dad had always insisted on them signing the quarterly reports, a tradition they dismissed as our father's old-fashioned way of keeping them involved in the business. His executive assistant would personally deliver them to their offices each quarter, waiting patiently while they hastily scrawled their signatures without reading a word. That's fraud," James sputtered. Margaret cleared her throat. "Everything was clearly stated in the documents. Your signatures were witnessed and notarized. Your failure to read what you were signing does not constitute fraud." I remembered Dad's words when we devised the strategy. "Your brothers think business is about power lunches and corner offices. Let's see if they've learned to read the fine print." "However," Margaret continued, "your father did not wish to leave you destitute. He believed in second chances, with conditions." She held up a thick envelope. This document outlines Phase 2 of the succession plan. Each of you has the opportunity to earn back a position in the company, along with a significant ownership stake. What kind of conditions? William's eyes narrowed. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manor's grounds. The gardeners were trimming the hedges into their precise shapes, a task that required patience, skill, and attention to detail, everything my brothers had always lacked. Each of you will start at entry-level positions, I explained. William, given your background in finance, you'll begin in our accounts receivable department. James, with your law degree, you'll start in our compliance division. Entry level? James looked like he might faint. I'm a partner at Stevens & Mitchell. We're a partner, Margaret corrected. Your father arranged for your position there to end today. Same with your banking job, William. The grandfather clock struck 4, its deep chimes echoing through the house. Right on cue, both their phones buzzed with emails, resignations effective immediately, drafted months ago by Dad's legal team. This is insane, William whispered. You can't just... I can, I said quietly, and I have. But unlike you two, I'm offering a genuine opportunity. Prove yourselves over the next 2 years, learn the business from the ground up, and you can earn back your places in the company. And if we refuse? James asked. I smiled. Then you keep your trust funds, the ones that mature when you turn 65. Until then, you'll receive a modest monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. James's face turned an interesting shade of purple. He just bought a new yacht, I remembered. I'd seen the purchase agreement come through our family office last month, as Phoenix Capital now managed all the Harrison family financial affairs, allowing me to monitor my brother's spending habits. There's more, Margaret added. Your father left personal letters for each of you. Rebecca, would you... I opened Dad's desk drawer and pulled out 2 sealed envelopes. My brothers took them with trembling hands. As they read, I watched their expressions change. Dad had always known exactly what to say to each of us. I'd read my letter the day after he died, words of pride, trust, and subtle guidance for the challenges ahead. William finished first, sinking deeper into his chair. James crumpled his letter, then smoothed it out again, as if unsure whether to preserve or destroy it. Dad knew, William said softly. About the insider trading, I nodded, and about the embezzlement at your bank. We have all the documentation. James's head snapped up. You're blackmailing us. No, I replied. I'm offering you protection. Accept the positions. Work hard, learn the business properly, and those incidents never come to light. Refuse, and well, I shrugged. Phoenix Capital has a strict policy about reporting financial misconduct. The room fell silent except for the faint sound of the gardeners outside. I could almost hear Dad's voice. Power isn't about having the biggest stick, Rebecca. It's about knowing when and how to use it. How long? William asked. How long have you been planning this? I sat back in Dad's chair, feeling its familiar comfort. Remember when I left 6 years ago? You both laughed, said I was running away from responsibility, but I was learning. Harvard Business School, internships at top investment firms, building connections, creating Phoenix Capital from scratch. While we were... James trailed off. While you were coasting on the family name, I finished. Taking shortcuts, breaking laws when it suited you. Margaret cleared her throat. The employment contracts are ready for your review. You'll have 24 hours to decide. After that, the regulatory authorities will receive some very interesting documents. And if we prove ourselves, William asked. I opened another file on my laptop. Then you each receive 20% of the company's shares. I retain controlling interest, but you'll have real power, real responsibility, earned, not inherited. Why? James's voice was barely a whisper. Why go through all this? Because Dad believed in legacy, I answered. Not just money and property, but values, ethics, real business acumen. He wanted his children to be worthy of the Harrison name, not just entitled to it. I stood up, gathering my things. You have 24 hours. The contracts are with Margaret. I suggest you read them carefully this time. As I walked toward the door, William called out, "Where are you going?" "To the office. Unlike some people, I actually work for a living." I paused at the threshold. "Oh, and James? Call the yacht broker. You're going to need that money for rent." The security cameras recorded their stunned faces as I left. Outside, the sun had fully emerged, making the wet gardens glisten. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Miss Harrison," my assistant answered. "How did it go?" "Just as Dad predicted," I replied. "Have the HR team ready tomorrow morning. I have a feeling we'll have 2 new entry-level employees to orient." "And if they refuse?" I smiled, thinking of the additional documents hidden in Dad's safe. They won't. Phase 3 will make sure of that. The real game was just beginning, and I had all the pieces in place. Dad had taught me well. Sometimes the best power play is the one your opponents never see coming until it's too late. The next morning, Harrison Global Enterprises' modern glass headquarters buzzed with unusual energy. Word had spread quickly. The Harrison brothers were starting their first day of work in entry-level positions. I watched from my top-floor office as James's Maserati pulled into the parking garage, followed by William's more modest BMW. They'd shown up. Phase 3 could begin. "They're here," my assistant announced through the intercom. "Human Resources is ready for their orientation." "Have them sent up here first," I replied. Minutes later, my brothers entered, both looking uncomfortable in business casual attire instead of their usual bespoke suits. James had dark circles under his eyes, and William's usual confident stance was notably absent. "Sit," I gestured to the chairs facing my desk. The wall of windows behind me offered a spectacular view of Boston's financial district, a reminder of the power they'd lost and could potentially regain. "Before you start orientation," I began, "there's something else you need to see." I pressed a button, and a hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing a wall safe. Dad's private safe. But that was in his study. William recognized it. "This is a replica," I explained, entering the combination. "The original is still at the manor, but its contents were moved here last week." Inside was a single USB drive and another envelope. I inserted the drive into my laptop, and my father's face appeared on the large screen mounted on the wall. "My children," Dad's recorded image spoke, looking exactly as he had a week before his death. "If you're watching this, then everything has proceeded according to plan." James shifted in his seat. William leaned forward. "Rebecca," Dad continued, "has proven herself beyond my highest expectations. But this was never just about finding a successor. It was about saving our family." The camera panned to show documents spread across his desk. "James, William, I know about everything. The insider trading, the embezzlement, attempts to undermine your sister when she tried to introduce modern practices to our company." My brothers paled. There was more they hadn't told me, clearly. "But I also remember you as children. William, who cried when his pet fish died and insisted on a proper funeral. James, who gave his allowance to a homeless man and tried to hide it from us. You weren't always driven by greed and entitlement." Dad's eyes seemed to stare directly at them through the screen. "That's why I agreed to Rebecca's plan, not just to protect our company, but to save you both." "Your plan?" William turned to me. "I engineered Phase 3, I said. Dad modified it, but the core concept was mine." On screen, Dad held up a familiar document. "This is the real inheritance document. Rebecca doesn't just control the company, she controls your futures, but not as a punishment, as an opportunity." He smiled sadly. "Your sister understands something you both forgot. True wealth isn't in bank accounts or property deeds, it's in the relationships we build, the trust we earn, and the legacy we leave." James wiped his eyes quickly. William stared at his hands. "So here's the final twist," Dad continued. "Rebecca has full discretion over your employment conditions. She can modify them, accelerate them, or terminate them. But there's one condition even she can't change." I opened the envelope from the safe and spread out the contents. "Family dinner," I said quietly. "Every Sunday, mandatory attendance. No business talk allowed." "Because," Dad's recording continued, You need to remember how to be a family again. Rebecca will lead the company, but she needs her brothers, not as employees, but as family." The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, I could hear the faint hum of the office air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic below. "There's more," I said, pulling out final documents. "If you successfully complete 1 year, not 2, of genuine effort in your positions, you'll each receive 15% of company shares. Another 10% will be held in trust for your children." "Our children?" William looked confused. "Your future children," I clarified. "Dad believed in planning ahead, way ahead." James stood up and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the bright morning sky. "All this, it was never about punishing us, was it?" "No," I replied. "It was about saving you, saving us as a family." William joined his brother at the window. "We were horrible to you, Rebecca. All those years you were—" "I know," I agreed, "but you're still my brothers. And Dad believed you could change." "And you," James turned, "do you believe we can change?" I stood up, joining them at the window. Below, the city was fully awake now, people rushing to their offices, living their lives, pursuing their dreams. "I believe," I said carefully, "that this company needs more than just my vision. It needs your legal expertise, James, properly applied this time, and your financial acumen, William, used for growth, not personal gain. But first," I continued, "we need to rebuild trust, starting with Sunday dinner." "Where?" William asked. "My place," I smiled. "I make a mean lasagna, and I have pictures from my Harvard graduation that you both missed, plus all your childhood embarrassments that Dad secretly saved." James actually laughed, a real laugh, not his usual condescending chuckle. "You're going to hold those over us forever, aren't you?" "Of course I am. I'm a Harrison, after all." The next few months weren't easy. James struggled with taking orders from younger colleagues. William had to relearn basic accounting practices he'd skipped over in his rush to the top. But slowly, things began to change. Sunday dinners became a genuine time for reconnection. Between mouthfuls of lasagna and stories, we rediscovered what it meant to be siblings, not just business rivals. 6 months in, I called them both to my office again. They entered cautiously, but with more confidence than that first day. "The board is impressed with your progress," I began, "especially the ethics committee." "Is this about the shares?" William asked. "It hasn't been a year yet." "No," I smiled. "This is about Phase 4. "There's a Phase 4? James groaned. "Dad's reaching from beyond the grave again." I laughed. "Actually, Phase 4 is mine. How would you both feel about joining me in a new venture? Something separate from Harrison Global, but complementary, a chance to build something together as equals." Their faces showed surprise, then interest. We spent the next 3 hours discussing possibilities, arguing good-naturedly about business models, markets, strategies. It felt right. 1 year to the day after that first inheritance meeting, we gathered in Dad's old study. The security cameras were still there, silent witnesses to our family's transformation. "I have something to show you," I said, pulling up the footage from that dramatic first meeting. We watched our past selves, barely recognizing the entitled, angry men and the defensive, prepared woman we'd been. "We were such idiots," William mused. "Were?" James quipped, earning a playful punch from our brother. I looked at them, really looked at them. James had lost the arrogant edge to his smile. William's eyes had renewed the kindness I remembered from our childhood, and I had gained something too. Brothers I could trust, not just with business, but with my life. "Dad would be proud," I said gently, "of all of us." The security cameras were quietly recording this moment too, but we didn't need recordings anymore to remember who we were or what we meant to each other. We were Harrisons, not just in name or inheritance, but in spirit. And that, as Dad had known all along, was worth more than any estate.